Howdy all of you delicious people, I'm here today to review Police Academy. So you can understand probably the success of the Police Academy when you can look at shows like Nathan Fillion's The Rookie, or you could look at shows like Cops, or you could go on and find a number of other kind of police kind of movies or shows like Dog the Bounty Hunter and stuff like that, where you can see why those things were so successful and why that this movie had gone on to make so many films. So, with that said, the Police Academy, of course, is to be like the normal way to approach like putting any kind of ensemble cast together into eventually reminding us of movies like Major League, Stripes, or Animal House. There might be another one in there, like the Keanu Reeves movie Replacements. All feels fairly similar, all feels kind of the same. And I guess if it's not broke, don't fix it. But so we go on into Police Academy, and the one thing about this movie is we have a character kind of for everybody, where it seems that you would have Mahoney, who's kind of this practical joker, who's not taking everything seriously. We, of course, have Hooks, who's to be this very quiet and very silent girl. And then we also have Larvell Jones, who, of course, is the standout character for this franchise, where he, of course, is to make these kind of very kind of sound effects throughout this film that are to go on and make you go and be like, wow, like I've always ever wanted to do that kind of mimicry or that kind of like sound effect like thing. And it's interesting to kind of see a character who was to open that door to make you realize, like, oh yeah, like I guess anybody could go on and sound just like this and sound like a very tiny voice. You know what I'm saying? To the point of you just going on and kind of playing with mimicry and sounding like all kinds of things. So with that said, LeVar Jones, Michael Winslow, uh, yeah, like gave us a lot of just interesting, fun things to be brought without this movie. But anyways, so with that said, let's go on into, of course, the Police Academy. Tee it up. This movie is easily available on Netflix right now for however long that really is. So with that said, what is this movie actually about? So we have a number of people that are to come into the Police Academy because it seems that the mayor is to drop a certain requirement of height or weight or like certain requirements for anybody to go on and be a police officer. So it seems that a lot more people who would normally be thinking about being a police officer is to go on and be pushed to being one. So we have a number of people that have been waiting all their lives to go on and do something like this, and then there's also certain people who are forced into it because of a arrangement between guys like Mahoney and Captain Reed. So eventually we go on and have certain characters who are also to be coming into the fray here that are to be very fun and interesting. And it's also really interesting to see how often in this movie we end up seeing topless women or like shower scenes and all kinds of stuff, because I only remember watching this via TV, and then when I'm watching it here I'm like, wow, like there seems to be a lot more scenes here than I realized there were. But anyways, luckily none of those scenes had anything to do with much of the story, so they could edit them out or change them for what they are. So with that said, you have a lot of interesting side stories like Mahoney and Hightower, uh, and having a number of people like helping one another out learn certain kind of techniques, or eventually, towards the end of this movie, they just need to have this big event that involves desperately having this police academy having to be called as a reserved thing to help out the normal police force. And we get into just a lot of the fun of that, or just um, moments where eventually we have to figure out how to wrap this movie up. But not only that, we have Mahoney, who is to consistently trying to get out of being in the police academy by any means possible. And so we have a lot of practical jokes, or we have at some point where Mahoney is to try and push the envelope to see if anybody's going to go on and kick him out. Kind of course, like we had Winger / Bill Murray in the movie Stripes, kind of the same kind of character, where we always have this kind of one character who is to try to get out of where he's, of course, being put in. Kind of like Pauly Shore's in the Army Now, also, where it kind of feels like the same kind of story or similar story with Police Academy. How we have a number of like goofy characters that have their unique set of skills that are to help them out in their day-to-day job. So with that said, let's go into the double 5 time territory. Let's just go into spoilers about this one. I'm going to go out of my way to say it's about that time to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about that time to get spoil this movie. The gun makes so much more sense to plop this down in this one compared to so many others, considering we have a character like Tackleberry, who is to go on and shoot first and then ask questions later. But definitely also liked Callahan, the strong and firm instructor that is to go on and make everyone miserable. But then it seems that we come to find out that maybe Callahan simply needed to find something to make her one of the group, and so I thought that was kind of funny. So with that said, let's go into the beginning of this movie. So in the beginning of it, we have this like Star Wars story crawl kind of thing. Not exactly, but like we just have a number of dialogue that we have to get into, where supposedly the mayor is to change the requirements of height, weight, and everything like that, to then give more of a people a chance to become police officers. So we then start to see guys like Tackleberry, who is to be this security guard at this establishment, this business, and all of a sudden Tackleberry is to find himself very trigger happy, and is to notice that there is one guy leaving for the day. And so the one guy who's leaving for the day is telling Tackleberry, it's like, well, hey, like Tackleberry, it's too bad that we're losing you, but like I'm sure you're gonna be a good fit in the police academy. As this guy is just so scared, and so he's kind of like slowly but surely walking on. So all of a sudden we have two people running from one end of this hallway to the next, and so Tackleberry is to hear this sound and is to follow exactly what this all is, to then go on, open this door, guns a-blazing, to come to find out that they had gone on and done this whole celebratory party for Tackleberry leaving. And they're all like, surprise! As everybody's like cake in their face, and they all look scared out of their wits. So we then go on to Leslie Barbara, who is to be this guy who works at this little Kodak vendor little box thing, and it seems that we have a number of hooligans, or a number of men, who are to take Barbara's little small box thing that he's working in, and tips this over into the bridge, and with Barbara in it. And so Barbara is to go on and mention that that he is, of course, no longer going to be working at this job, and he's going to be a police officer to go after these guys anyways and get even with them. So we also have a guy named Frackler, who, of course, is to make his way to police academy, and his wife is desperately grabbing onto him and telling him not to go, and he, of course, to drive off anyways. And so now we have Miss Frackler going through a number of these different kind of houses, kind of jumping from fence to fence, trying to get to her husband. And so we have Miss Frackler trying to stop Frackler from driving off, and so she jumps onto his hood, and we just eventually see Doug Frackler driving away with Miss Frackler to go on to the police academy. So we also go on and see women like Thompson, who I guess the main attraction of her wanting to be in the police academy is that she wants to dress like men, and also so does Mahoney. That whole phrase ends up happening a little bit later. So Karen is to talk to her mother and is in this kind of limousine and is saying that she wants to become a police officer. And so it seems that Thompson is not going to be talked out of this. So now I think we've gone on and covered most of the beginning characters here. So now let's go on and cover Mahoney. So Mahoney is to be this parking attendant, and all of a sudden is to be seeing a man who is to desperately want to go on and want his car parked. And Mahoney is to make fun of this guy for him possibly having a wig, and evidently this guy is to be called Mr. Wig in the IMDb. So all of a sudden, Mr. Wig is to go on and desperately want a manager, which all of a sudden he magically arrives. And all of a sudden now this manager is to tell Mahoney to go on and park this guy's car. And Mahoney is to desperately tell Mr. Wig, as well as talking to his manager, that there is no more spots left. But they want him to park this car anyways. So Mahoney just goes on and is to figure out a way to tilt this car off to the side, drive into this one sliver of a parking spot, and then the car drops, and Mahoney is to try to make his way out of this car and say, yeah, I guess there was a spot after all, leading Mahoney to then go and be arrested for damages upon this car. So Mahoney ends up getting arrested, and we of course have Mahoney, who bumps into Lavelle Jones, who of course is to mention why he was to go on and get arrested, and it was simply for doing this kind of machine gun sound effect. And everybody's kind of ducking and cover. I'm like, oh my god, that LeVar Jones, god dang you, this machine gun kind of sound. So we have Mahoney that is to become instant friends with Jones, and so Mahoney goes on to talk to Captain Reed, who of course he is old friends with, and so Mahoney is hoping that Captain Reed is going to get him out of this this kerfuffle, this issue. And Captain Jones is to go on and tell Mahoney, it's like, well, hey, I'll go on and let you out of this if you only go on to the police academy, where you're going to go there for the whole entire time. And so Mahoney is to go on and say, like, well, okay, like, I guess it's better than jail. So Mahoney then is to go on to the police academy, where we have a number of cluster of people that are all to showcase themselves. We have a guy named George Martin, who is to seem to have a number of women that he is to always have consistently, to the point of him at some points in this movie sneaking into the girls' wing of the academy and consistently sleeping with a number of women, to the point of eventually George finding Callahan and eventually having them tear one another apart, to the point of George thinking that maybe he is possibly in love with Callahan. And we have Mahoney, who ends up confronting George about, like, well, hey, like, it seems that you have an accent that is kind of in and out. Like, what's all that about? And George has mentioned that he only uses the accent so he can get a bunch of women, but like he had probably lost his accent a while ago, but he just kind of sticks with it so that way he can get women, because women like accents, obviously. Go on and know any part of my life of which that a guy would have an accent and he would have multiple women just follow him around, just swoon over him, and I'm like, okay, this makes no sense. But hey, like, I guess I should just go on and just pretend when I go into a location that I have an accent, simply just so that way I can go on and get women, which is kind of weird. But it works for people, weirdly enough. I don't know why. But so we go on, and so Mahoney is to go on with of course Jones, LeVar, to make it into this police academy, where, of course, we have Lieutenant Harris, who is talking to Commandant Lassar, and it seems that the goal here, uh, when both of them are speaking to their superior, is that they want to go on and figure out how to go on and get rid of as many people as possible, because really, a lot of these people kind of coming in should not be qualified to be police officers, but we're going to go on and have to push them through anyways because of the changes and the tweaks. So we also have guys like Copeland and guys like Blanks, who are to go on and take the police academy fairly seriously, to where they go on and they cut their hair very military style. And when George Martin is to get his hair cut, it's like, oh, just take a little off the sides. And they're like, wait a minute, what? And so the barber ends up telling the guys, it's like, well, yeah, like, this isn't the military. Like, get your hair cut however you want to. So they're like, oh, well, because they have long hair at the beginning of this movie and they end up buzzing it down. So so we go on and have everybody at first who is to all get their kind of clothes. And so we of course have guys like Tackleberry, who's asking whether or not they're going to have guns, and not quite yet. So, like, at first, most of them are to be wearing sweats that have, of course, Police Academy, the logo on it, and so on and so forth. But so, eventually, when everybody is to line up, we, of course, have Mahoney, who is to play a trick on Thompson and is to want to go on and immediately ask for this girl's, like, phone number and ask her about her thighs. And because Mahoney is to pretend that he is, of course, Thompson's supervisor or her instructor. And so Thompson is to go on and tell Mahoney all this information. And then Thompson is to get fairly odded out about it. And so then Lieutenant Harris is to come and see Mahoney doing this and is to tell him to get back in line. So, but we then go on and have Mahoney reconfirm with Thompson later about, like, Mahoney desperately wanting to go on and know about Thompson's thighs, and so she describes them to him, and so he feels fulfilled with, of course, what he was to go on and ask. So, immediately having Lieutenant Harris taking a personal interest in Mahoney, and Mahoney desperately just trying to figure out a way to get out of here, hoping that he will probably get out of here by a certain time period within the day, and that time period consistently changes. So Mahoney is to say that he'll be out of here by 10, and then all of a sudden he ends up saying that he'll be out of here by 3, and then the more and more he goes on and pushes boundaries and is to mess with people, the more he realizes that he won't be able to get out of here, and he has to stay throughout the 24 weeks. And so we have Commandant Lassard, who is to welcome everybody to the academy and is to tell them that they are going to be here for or no, wait, it's not 24 weeks, it's 14 weeks. So Lassard is to tell them that it's 14 weeks, and that he ends up saying weirdly that he says 12. So he says 14, but then he says 12. So it's like, how long? How long is this? So Lassard goes on and welcomes everybody, and then goes about his day. I think Lassard, through most of these movies, he has a lot more jokes and a lot more comedy. I think for this one, um, like, it's very unsure what to think about Lassard, but in the further on movies, like, Lassard has a lot more jokes and is a lot more funny character than he was in this film. So Mahoney is to start to go on and try to rib Harris. Because we have, of course, Harris, who's going on and at first making all these guys go on and do this brisk walk, having Callahan kind of pushing them all to go on and do this jog. And Mahoney is desperately going on and saying, like, man, this isn't all that brisk. Man, this freaking sucks. So everybody, of course, is getting fairly winded. So when they go on and they start doing this whole obstacle course thing, we have guys awesomely like Hightower, who goes on and just like kind of freaking kicks this brick wall down and then just walks over it. And so like Harris is just like, okay, all right, well, that's just the way he does things. Um, we also have Hook, who is trying to desperately jump over this, get over this wall, and she just can't. And so we of course have Harris, who is to tell her, just go around, just go around. So we have Harris, who is to have this megaphone, and you can't always make it out what exactly he says. Like, I went on and just was to watch this movie with subtitles anyway, so I got what he said. But a lot of times it's like, like, that's what I kind of heard through the megaphone a lot. And so with that, we have Mahoney, who goes on and does a practical joke on Harris by going on and putting shoe polish on Harrison's megaphone. Because, of course, we have Mahoney, who is trying to get out of here, and so he ends up purposely cutting up his attire so that way Harris would push him off to go and get new pants. And so Mahoney is to ask for shoe polish, to where he puts shoe polish on Mahoney's megaphone, and is to play this practical joke. So we have Harris, who is to personally take interest in both Copeland and both Blanks, because he is to look into their rooms and see how nice and neat it is, as they're both just wearing boxers. And we of course have Harris, who's to tell both Copeland and Blanks that they are going to be like the top guys in this class, and that he wants them to kind of look into all the people to start to weed them out. We also have Harris, who is to go on and say that all these people that he is working with are all to be called dirtbags. If he, of course, is to call them dirtbags, they are to answer to him because really that's all they all are. So we go into this film, and practical jokes are to consistently be happening and fun things throughout. So we have of course eventually there being this time of break for this academy, and so Harris to go on and give them kind of this liberty, this time for them to just kind of have fun, and so supposedly everyone is to go out for this party, and so we have both Blanks and we have both Copeland, who end up having Barbara, who is to supposedly figure out where this party is supposed to be, and Barbara is mentioning that he's not going because he's going to go on and see his family. But so Barbara is to go on and ask Mahoney where, of course, this party is, even though he's not going, and Mahoney is to figure out why. So Mahoney ends up telling Barbara that the party is going to be at this Blue Oysters bar. So both Copeland and both Blanks go to this Blue Oysters bar, where come to find out this is to be a uh, a possible, let's just say, gay bar, and there is to be a number of men who are all to be wearing leather and lace and so on and so forth. And we then go on and have these guys throughout the whole entire night of this party, having both Copeland and having both Blanks, who are dancing with these gentlemen, while of course the real party is going on, where a number of women are all to get topless. And we of course have Mahoney, who goes with Thompson to find out why Thompson joined the police academy, and Thompson wanted to wear men's clothes. So Mahoney is like, well, so do I. So we excuse me. So we go on, in the next day have Harris, who is to ask both Blanks and Copeland about the party, and both of them end up trying to not say what it all actually happened. So they just said that there was just a lot of dancing that happened the night before. And Harris is like, dancing, huh? All right, well, all right. So letting it go. So we go on and have a number of people that are to go on and have a number of problems throughout this film. But so let's cover some hijinks that happen in this movie, but also some story that happens in this film also. So we have guys like Mahoney, who is to have a hooker that just somehow appears in his room. And so Mahoney is to grab this hooker to then have her go into this room where Commandant Lassard is making this speech. So they hide underneath this podium and have this hooker who is to give Lassard a BJ. And while he, of course, is to struggle to still do this speech, we, of course, have this hooker who is blowing away. So after Lassard is to finish with this speech and then is to pull away, we then have Mahoney, who is to kind of poke his head out and say, Lassard, nice speech. And he pokes his head back in to that whole thing. So we have Lassard, who is to run off to Harrison and is to tell Harrison, like, we need to get rid of Mahoney. And the lieutenant is to go on and, like, why? And Lassard is just kind of lost for words. And so he's like, because I don't know, but we have to get rid of him. So Lassard doesn't want to go on and say what happened to him. So we have Lieutenant Harris that is desperate to try to get rid of Mahoney, and so he talks to Captain Reed to try to figure out if they can have a disagreement to get Mahoney out of here. Because Mahoney can't quit, and when Mahoney is to talk to Lasar, Lasar is to mention that Captain Reed had talked to him and wanted him there the whole time, and no matter what. And when Mahoney is to talk to Harris, Harris is to try to call Captain Reed, and Mahoney's looking out this window at Thompson, who's wearing this skimpy outfit, and he is to realize that maybe there's a reason for him wanting to be here, and it's maybe wanting him to just really be with Thompson. So we have Mahoney that is to take the phone call for Captain Reed and try to quickly have an argument about, like, hey, Captain Reed, can I leave? No? Oh, that's too bad. And so gives it right back to Harris, and no matter what Harris does, there is no way to get rid of Mahoney. So he's staying here regardless, no matter what he does, no matter what he pulls. So we push on to then have Hightower. Hightower, of course, to ask Mahoney for help, because of course Hightower is desperately need to learn how to drive and to help with this exam. So Mahoney goes on to then help Hightower out, and we also have Mahoney, who is to find out that Hightower was previously a florist, a guy working with flowers, and then was to get burnt out doing it. So Mahoney goes on with Hightower to drive this car, and it seems that, of course, Hightower cannot fit in this car, so they end up tearing out the front two seats and then driving. And Mahoney's like, well, I was just joking about the whole, like, tearing out the seats thing, but you went for it. So they go on and they're driving around town, and all of a sudden Hightower is getting in this high-speed chase where he's easily getting away from everybody. And so it seems that these police officers end up crashing their car, and Hightower ends up getting away. So come to find out, they had been using Copeland's car, and so the next day we of course have Hightower that does very well on his driving exam, and we then turn around and have Hooks, who is to go on to do her driving exam, and it seems that Hooks is to accidentally run over the feet of Copeland. So all of a sudden we have Copeland, who is to say something horrible to Hooks, which all of a sudden gets Hightower very upset, to the point of Hightower walking on to Copeland, and Copeland is to desperately get into this car. Hightower is to flip the car over, and so that ends up leading to Hightower getting kicked off of the academy. I'm like, why didn't Mahoney just do that? So Hightower then leaves, and Hook is trying to comfort Hightower, and so we then go on, and we eventually have to understand why all these police academy members were all chosen to be in this film. Besides them going through the one gym lesson where Callahan goes on and is to grab Barbara and is to take him and flip him, and then Callahan is to drop her knees and, like, plant herself where she's just sitting on top of Barbara's chest. Callahan is to want anybody to go on and try next, and all the guys are desperate to eventually be flipped and tackled and taken down by Callahan, and so everyone's desperately trying to. So So let's go on and get into the whole riot part of this film, because I think everything else almost is covered by now. In a very roundabout way, I realize that, but there's so many things that eventually are to just be these little skits and little pieces. Like we go on and we have Harrison who is walking through, uh, seeing everybody going on in their little rooms, and Harrison is to look at Jones, who is kind of playing this video game, and freaking like he's imagining that he's playing this video game uh, that he's doing maybe well in. So we push on, and there's a riot in the street. It starts to be like one thing leads to another. That there is this domino effect of this riot that ends up happening. Uh, it seems that one day, like one person is to accidentally like fall on another, and that all of a sudden leads to this whole fight, and all of a sudden this leads to one guy who is see this fight happening and like, hey, hold this TV, and then one guy is shouting out like, oh my god, they're giving away free TVs, and then everyone is just crazily just rioting and stealing, and like the whole town is to have lost control. So we go on to then have the academy, who is supposed to be backup for the actual police, and so we have Harris, who is calling everybody in to, of course, get in their riot gear. And we also had a scene where both Coleman and Blanks were trying to go on and get rid of Mahoney, and so they're in the cafeteria putting a bunch of mashed potatoes on Mahoney's uniform, and Mahoney realizes that if he goes on and fights these guys, that he'll get kicked out. And the more and more that these two guys push, all of a sudden we have Barbara who comes into defense of Mahoney, and all of a sudden there ends up being a fight here, and Mahoney is to desperately plead to Harris and anybody that like, hey, don't you guys want to just get rid of me? Like, just say it was me who threw the first punch, so I'll get out of here. So they end up kicking him out, but conveniently this riot all happens on the day of which that Mahoney is to leave. So Mahoney decides to go on to be a part of this whole riot squad. And so we then go on and have everybody get out of this bus and are all making their way through parts of this town to supposedly have to police it. And come to find out, the place where the riot had gone on is nowhere near where these guys are at. So this was kind of a goofy mistake. Plus, also, it doesn't really make sense to have separated these people if there's a riot going on, to have separated these people so much so. So we also had Harris, who's to have to reconfirm before they get off this bus that they should not be firing their weapons, and is to go on and find Tackleberry, remind him to not go on and shoot off his gun, because of course when they were to go on and have this shotgun through this little kind of pop-up gun practice, we of course have Tackleberry, who is using all of this military experience that he of course was to have to go on and do this in an unorthodox style compared to everyone else. And we also have guys like Barbara, who were to go on and shoot things by accident, to where everybody, when they see like the gun kind of going into their direction, they duck for cover. So we now are in riot mode. So the rioting, of course, is to all of a sudden lead to a swarm of people all making their way through one street. And now all of a sudden we have a number of people, first leading to George Martin, who is to be holding this TV for some woman, and then realizes that there's a number of people in this one street. And so George Martin starts running and is to find both Mahoney and Jones and tells them to start running also. So all of a sudden, we then start to see more and more people who are starting to riot, and the police officers are running from them. We have Barbara, who of course is running through his street, calling Harris, letting him know that there is a riot happening. We also have guys like Copeland and Blanks who are to see a number of guys through this fence, and they're like, "Ha ha ha! You guys can't get to us because you're on the other side of this fence." And come to find out there was an opening in this fence, and so the police officers, both Blanks and Copeland, give up their guns for, of course, this one guy who is to be called the main bad guy is to grab these guns and is to run off to find Harris and is to hold him up. So we then go on and have Callahan, Thompson, and Hook, who are to go on and be in one part of this town, and they all of a sudden see the main bad guy who is to be holding a gun against Harris, and so they end up getting shot out pretty well to where they hide out. So Thompson is to be stuck behind this wooden box, and she can't move. So we have Martin, Mahoney, and Jones who all find Lasar in this vehicle, and so all of a sudden, while they end up getting into this car, Lasar is like, "Well, hey, how's the rioting going?" And all of a sudden, we see a swarm of these people all around Lasar's car, and he's like, "Oh, okay, I guess it's going like this." So Lasar tries to calm people down, but that doesn't work. So Jones goes on and grabs uh, this thing and starts like machine gunning sounds, and everybody is to scramble out of there because they're thinking they're getting shot. So the car drives away, making it to the spot where Thompson is. And when Mahoney ends up getting out, he's telling Thompson to just stay there while he goes around to try to figure out where this guy is in this building. So when Mahoney goes on to find his way to where this guy is, we also have Hightower, who is making his way through this town, trying to possibly think if he can go on and help anybody. So as he's going on and taking his florist apron off, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to go through this town and see what I can do. So we all of a sudden have Mahoney, who is to find this main bad guy and is to whip his gun out and is to try to help out Harris. And so Mahoney is to ask Harris if there's any last minute tips, and Harris has got nothing. So we have Harris, who of course to be gun drawn upon his head. So Mahoney then is to give up his gun and is to be like pushed right, of course, where Harris and Mahoney are about to be killed here by this bad guy. So we all of a sudden have Hightower, who comes in and saves the day by telling this guy he wants to see these two cops being shot, and he picks one of them to get killed. And then Hightower goes on and punches this bad guy to fall down these flight of stairs, as we were to also have gone on and seen two times where people were to have fallen down flights of stairs in this movie, which I find to be the best act done in a film. Because we also had Jones, who was to also fall down these flights of stairs in the early part of this movie, and then he ends up getting up and he's like, whoa. So after that moment, after it seems that the riot has all settled down, we then go on to this awards ceremony that we have to do in every single movie because we have nothing else better to do than to give people awards. Look at Star Wars. So we, of course, have Hightower and we have Mahoney, who are both getting these awards for their achievements. And so we then go on and have Hightower, who is supposed to give his little brief thing, and Hightower ends up just saying thanks, And then when Mahoney is to go up there, he is to want to give this whole long speech thanking everybody. And all of a sudden, we have underneath this podium, we have this hooker, and Mahoney is to realize that he's going to get played just like Lasar did. And so that's the way the movie just kind of ends, with this kind of celebration and everybody eventually going on and playing police officers, and with a number of sequels that are to go on to be a thing in our lives for these films. We then go on and see a number of interesting cluster of different characters, but also we bring back a lot of the characters from the previous iterations of this. So with that said, I'm going to go on and get out of here. Let me know in the comments below how you felt about Police Academy. If there was a scene that I forgot in this movie, let me know also in the comments below, because I'm sure that there probably is a million of them that I did. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.